to everyone who signed up. We've got 73 people signed up. As usual, we probably get less than half of that coming in. For anybody who's listening, if you do have to leave or take a call, don't worry, the session's being recorded. I'll do the edit today or tomorrow and send it all out to you who've signed up first, and then it will go live to the rest of the membership next week. So again, thank you all for signing up, but thank you especially to my brilliant panel today. I'm so grateful to you. This has come about actually because Ria and Nishat and Shivani at Formula Group wanted to do something on learning and development, and I'm so grateful to you for bringing this topic to us so that we can examine it. It's been, as we all know, an extraordinary year. And during that time, I think probably learning and development has been so key. And that's why I'm so delighted to welcome Ria Narula from Formula Group, Aideen Hopkins, Operations Director at EuRA, based in Dubai, but working across the Middle East. Mima Hillier, CEO and MD of TTH Curzon, based in the UK, working all over the UK. And Dr. Carmelina Lawton-Smith, who, if you don't know Carmelina by now, you really need to get to know her. She is our strategic consultant for education, also still supporting the work of the International Centre for Coaching and Leadership and Mentoring at Oxford Brookes University, which is where we first met when I came along to a culture day, gosh, 10, 15 years
Long time ago.
Long time ago. And Carmelina and I have worked together on the development of all the programs that you see behind me. And this is not, this briefing is not a big plug for the Managing International Mobility Programme. We are using that as a cornerstone because that program has been subject of such huge take-up over the last year, which is fantastic. And I'll just take the opportunity to let you all know the final extension of totally free certification on the MIM program is happening now. It will go on until May the 1st. So if anybody in your team hasn't done it and you want them to, they've got another 5 weeks in which to go through it before we will be, levying a charge again. So I, having said that, wanted to put something together about learning and development from the basis of what it means organisationally. So the reason I asked these fine people here, first of all, Aideen, huge population of executive expatriate relocations went through the MIM programme. And I know even before all of that and this very strange year, you'd placed a very high emphasis on ongoing professional development within your team. So thank you so much for being part of it. Mima Hillier, I know you've done exactly the same thing. You've put all of your people through. You're going to talk about that more with Carmelina. And you're also, MIM Fellow, distinction, with distinction. If you didn't see Mima's fantastic session with Gordon last week on fraud prevention in small to medium-sized enterprises, it's on the YouTube channel. Take a look. It's great, and it's based on her excellent case study, for which you were awarded a distinction. And another amazing fellow of the EuRA Academy is Ria Narula. Ria, congratulations. You got your also distinction in fellowship last week for a really stunning piece of work on the use of different types and styles of communications in the education of consultants to really dig deep into how to assess and accurately deliver assignee, to assess assignee needs and then deliver the right services. It's a terrific piece of work, and we will be turning that into a briefing over the next few weeks. And thank you. It was great. I so enjoyed reading it, and again, it really opened my eyes. So I'm going to hand over to Carmelina. Carmelina, you're going to guide us through what learning and development means, not just in terms of our program, but in terms of organizational structure, team unity, and ultimately productivity. So thank you so much, Carmelina. Over to you.
Yeah, well, obviously, we at EuRA, we've invested a huge amount in the learning and development offers through this year, trying to support our members. And I'm just going to cover a few reasons why an organization really might want to do that, because for a lot of organizations, it's kind of, well, it's time and it's money, and, can we really afford this? So I'm going to talk about a few maybe organizational reasons why you might want to do that, and then actually talk to people on the ground, our invited panel who can kind of bring it to life. This isn't just coming out of a book. These are things that we have learned through real life experience. So thanks, Dom, for kind of setting this up. I've got 5, I suppose, core things that I just want to mention, and then I'll hand over. But the first is, I've worked with EuRA now for quite a lot of years. And whenever I talk to people outside the industry about working with relocation professionals, I'm still amazed at how many people don't really know what you guys do. They often think it's somewhere between project management and removals. They really don't appreciate the complexity. The legal, the tax knowledge is one thing, but there's the whole psychological side of it. You need to be counselor, teacher, linguist, mediator, cultural and religious expert probably falls in there somewhere, to name but a few, and generally have the patience of a saint and the persistence of a Rottweiler. And these high skills really are something that people don't appreciate. And if you think about any profession that people value, like accountants or lawyers, engineers, they all have a CPD requirement. And that's what commands the salaries and the respect. And for me, if we want to justify ourselves as specialists, as experts, and have people value what we do, then we have to treat ourselves as a profession. If we don't treat ourselves as a profession, why should anybody else? So if we treat our staff like administrators, then that's what they're going to act like, and that's what they're going to be treated like. So for me, there's a big thing about professional development in here. That if we want to professionalize the industry and be taken seriously, that professional development is part and parcel of that. The second is really about innovation and growth. There was a very famous book some years ago called The Fifth Discipline, in which Peter Senge said, well, if an organization's going to learn, the people in it have to learn first. And, we've all learned a huge amount of things over this year, new technologies, new ways of operating. And the organization can't do that without the people on the ground learning new stuff. And we know organizational graveyards are littered with organizations who didn't adapt, who didn't change. Nokia, Kodak, there's names that historically who should have been at the forefront of their industries, and they're just not. So that innovation needs people to be exposed to new ideas, to be prepared to learn new things. And the organization can't really grow without that. And it might be technology, it might be new methods, it might be just a new way to look at things. Because, if I was still training what I was training back in the 80s, I wouldn't be getting the sort of work that I get now. Clients want people who are at the forefront of those activities. And they want us to merge that new knowledge with our expertise that we have in the area. And implementing training really does help the reputation. It helps retention rates. I've got some numbers, which was according to the Association for Talent Development, companies that invest in training courses have a 21.8% higher income per employee and a 24% higher profit margin. So there are very good reasons from a growth perspective to focus on development and invest in it. And partly it's productivity. Giving people the skills to work smarter, multi-skilling people so that they can adapt and flex. We talk a lot about this agile working environment. That means we can adapt to stuff. And I would also say, don't forget that training is not just about content. It helps build team cohesion, getting the same language, having a shared experience. So putting people together, maybe to discuss case studies, maybe to talk about a personality profiling, it creates that common bond between people. And it signals that you value them. It helps your understanding of the job and helps you with the succession, the planning. If you are going to grow, who's going to take these jobs? And if I ask, sorry, I have a terrible throat. I've been talking all morning and it's starting to give out on me. And I started thinking, when did you guys look for another job? And it's probably because you were either bored or overwhelmed. And training and development helps with both of those. It gives people stretch, but it also makes them actually helps them with challenges or things that they're dealing with. So not underestimating that recruitment, retention and motivation that it gives people. And I would say this is very current in terms of the generation and how they work now. I mean, my own journey was to do an MSc back in 2001. And I did some research with graduates in quite a large organization. And they very much were on the basis of, well, we'll stay with this company for as long as we're invested in. They were on a 2-year graduate training program, but they felt no loyalty to be repaid after that 2-year investment. It was like, oh yeah, but if I don't then get to do an MBA and do this and do that. You know, my husband worked for his first employer for 25 years, and that's just not the case anymore. The new generation are looking for that stretch, for movement, and it becomes what we call part of the psychological contract that we have with our employees. Yes, they work hard for us, they get a fair rate of pay, but there's more going on than that. They expect that push, that stretch, the opportunities. And if you think back to motivation, a lot of you will have studied motivation and Maslow's triangle that we talk about. And that's because most people are already at the top of the triangle. You know, they're looking for that growth, that self-actualization, because they're pretty comfortable. You know, they're not struggling to pay the bills or to eat, in most parts of the world anyway. And PwC recently carried out some research with millennials around their expectations when looking for a new job. And, 22% were highlighting training and development as something they'd look for in a future employer. So they can get knowledge and information off the internet. So therefore, they want a lot more than that. So from my point of view, it's very much an investment, not an expense. And I think some of the examples we were just talking about with Dom really bring that home, thinking about the PR value. I completed my doctorate in 2012, and as a result of that, I've been asked to present at conferences, write chapters in books, and none of that would have come without having that expertise. Mima's written this brilliant case study on fraud that's then been publicized and gives lots of information. Ria's got another one, our most recent fellow, brilliant piece about taking ideas forward, and that will give her a PR platform to give a plug for both the organization and herself. And we shouldn't underestimate how much, blogging and social media means that new information and new ideas actually have a huge reach these days. And, think of it as research. Where would we be if no one was prepared to invest in R&D? Where would we be the vaccine situation now? There are no guarantees of success when people invest in this. With training and development, you don't know it's going to pay dividends. But if Ria's organization just get one client because she's written an article somewhere and somebody thinks that her organization are a top of the tree and are forward thinking enough to invest in that, maybe that would pay for it, So Dom asked us to talk about our own journeys, and I'm going to hand over to our illustrious panel in a second. Mine was very much sort of started with a psychology degree. I then worked, but when I got into training and development, I kind of thought, I really don't know enough about this area. So I did a master's in training and development just to give me that breadth, and it taught me a lot about national and global trends in development and how different national cultures approach that in terms of the investment up from manufacturing into the knowledge economy, and why as an economy you can only exist with big investment in R&D, and because you only ever have so many hours and so many people in the manufacturing side. And then I continued with certificates and individual courses each year. I mean, I have a kind of a rule that every year I develop myself in one thing, because as a coach I need to demonstrate CPD, and I think there are things I do now that I never thought I could. I never thought I could write chapters in books and articles, but it's amazing. You can get some real feeling of worth by being able to grow in yourself as a person. So I found it really stimulating, engaging. It's kept me going. But if I hand over to our illustrious panel, if I start with Aideen, shall I start with you in terms of what's made you think it's been a worthwhile investment?
Yeah, so I suppose like you, I mean, I went to university, got my degree, and kind of went straight into work after that. But I have to say, probably in the last 5 years, my training and development has really started out on a journey. And I think one of the most important aspects for me has been reading. And starting to read books, you know, and as a board, every quarter before our board meeting, we pick a book. We will read that book and report back to the board on what we have learned and, you know, ideas for implementation within the business. And for me, I found that has really helped me to grow and develop. And I think, you know, we have started out with books like Scaling Up to our most recent one being called Surrounded by Idiots, which I have to say was a great book. And, you know, gave really great insight, not into you as an individual, but your board colleagues, you know, and then that's something that we actually brought back into the business as well. And some training that we did for all of the staff on the social styles. And, you know, we had great fun doing that with everybody in the room because, you know, we kind of set out the floor, we put a big cross on the floor, and based on a series of questions, everybody moved into a section where they felt that they belonged, you know, and we have everything with a complete mix from drivers to analyticals to the amiables and the expressives. But what it really enabled people to do was to actually understand each other better. I think particularly from a communication perspective. So, you know, for example, me, I sit within an analytical, that's where I am a blue person. And so now they realize if they're coming to me for anything, they have to come armed with details and facts and figures before I'm going to give a decision on anything, you know. Whereas the drivers who, you know, some people might feel, oh my God, these people are really pushy and demanding. It's understanding, well, why are they like that? Because that's just something that's innate with them, you know. And the business needs all of those people in order to get things done. And, you know, me, I'll work really well alongside Marie O'Neill, our managing director. She's a driver, I'm the analytical, so we're a great, you know, fit for each other and help each other to run and develop the business as well. So I have to say, I found the reading element really, really good. And actually tomorrow, I start my course on the certificate in board directorship. So I'm a member of the Board of Directors Institute here in the GCC, and I'm setting out on that tomorrow. And, you know, again, going back to kind of figures, you know, studies show that companies that, you know, have everything done from good governance, good compliance, that, you know, they are better businesses, more profitable businesses, the better run, managed, and the better governance that's in place. So I'm looking forward to getting started on that tomorrow.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I really like your idea about everybody, you know, sort of reading and bringing it back. It sounds like it's really created a bond and a collective approach within there. Yeah,
no, it's great. And even at our last board meeting, we all chose a leader to go and review the leaders. So the leaders ran from Kim Kardashian to the Queen, you know, and others in between. But it was great fun even just doing that and reporting back on that as well. And yeah, it's really, I love it because I like learning, I like doing new things. And it has definitely brought something to the board as well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Dom, did you want to add anything before I kind of move on to, I'm going to ask Mima.
No, I love the idea. I love the idea of the reading thing, and I think that's something we need to look at how we can incorporate that into our MIM program. Because I agree, you know, we've talked, Carmelina, you and I, about putting in place some kind of requirement for continuing professional development within that qualification. And I think, you know, just for the sake of the fact that you hear, you know, someone like Aideen saying, this is something we found has been absolutely brilliant, I think that would be great, no?
Mm. Yeah, we could do a book club. We could do a book club.
Yeah.
A book club. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Love it.
And that's the leverage. It's the power of everybody coming together, which is in, you know, when you have everybody in silos, it doesn't give you that collective. And that's why I say that it's not just what you've read, but it's the action of coming together to discuss it, which is, you know, you're saying as a benefit. So that's absolutely, that's brilliant. Thank you. So I'll come to Mima, and sort of similar question in terms of, you know, your journey in terms of development, and also with the organization, you know, why you think it's still an important thing apart from your personal journey.
Well, I've always been a very curious person. I always think that, you know, you don't know what you know without you learning something new. So that sort of brings you a perspective. So I started my journey. I did a master's I got my MSc in accounting, and that was really interesting, even though I'm not accountant. But then I did MBA 15 years after I finished my MSc. And that was 8 years after I started my own company. And that was really interesting, even though some of the stuff in MBA I already learned at university. But after running your own company for 8 years, it's actually validated everything and gave me new perspective what to do and how to run it. And actually my understanding of the whole subject was so much better after being out in a proper world. When the EuRA Academy started, I was there starting it, and I thought the MIMS for relocation was just absolutely fantastic, because we all know that relocation is not rocket science. We need oodles of common knowledge. We need somehow to validate what we do, and we need to sort of, learn new things. And the whole training in our organization, it's sort of, I asked the staff, and they all said that it gives you confidence. What you do is completely correct. It gives you the team, you know, belonging to a team. We all are doing it together. It's also, you can apply what you learn, you can then apply. It helps you to think outside the box, which is very important. There are two types of training, what we do in our organization. There is this compulsory training, what we call compulsory, is the legal training, the anti-money laundering, the GDPR, the tenancy agreements, everything else. And everybody has to do it because that's keeping us really current. But then there is the MIMS training, which the past year has taught us so much for all the staff, that there is actually aspects of relocation, what they touch every day, like cultural training, you know, intercultural relationships. But once they listen to it in a training program, they got so into it. And now 2 of them are thinking of doing a fellowship as well. So, you know, it's sort of, when you learn something new, even though you know about it and you know you're working with intercultural people, you work with all sorts of, you know, nationalities. But once you do the training, it's just sort of it just expands your whole knowledge of the area. And you learn everything, something new when you do it.
Yeah, I really like the point about looking at it with fresh eyes after you've run your own company, because what that says to me is that there is always potential to learn new things, no matter how high up the scale you are. That actually it's when you are running your own company that suddenly you do need to look at things in a different way. So I think that's a very valid point. It's not just the staff and everybody other people who need it. It's, you know, we all need that exposure to new thoughts and ideas. But I'm also struck by what you said about confidence, because quite often I'll do a lot of training and people actually gain a lot from being reminded of stuff that actually they realize they do know, and they kind of go, yeah, well, I do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's, you know, I'm not so stupid, you know, that the fact that guy is a complete idiot. Yes, he is an idiot. It's not that I don't know how to deal with him. It's just that he's just an idiot with everybody. So, you know, and giving them that sort of backup, that reminder, that confidence, I think is really, really valuable, because that's that thinking outside the box thing. You're right. When people get stressed, they get very tramlined in their thinking. It's kind of well known when people are under a lot of pressure, that their world kind of narrows. Because if you think historically, you know, if we were on the plains of Africa and, you know, we're being chased by a tiger, you know, makes pretty good sense to focus on the tiger and not look at the scenery, no matter how beautiful it is. And that's what happens to people under stress. You know, Ria's nodding because she's got a background in psychology. It's that sort of, if you have a problem, all you can focus on is a problem. And it sometimes does need people to kind of go, okay, let's look at this wider.
In a way, COVID was quite good, giving all of us this break. So, you know, it was, the world slowed down a bit. Everybody had more time, like especially in the UK and all the countries, the lockdown. So last spring, when we put everybody through the MIMS program, People were so happy to doing it. They were so committed because time wasn't a strain any longer.
Yeah.
They had loads of time to do it, and they were able to get into it. And actually, they used the time when there was nothing to do to actually learn something new. And the ideas which has developed from there, you know, we have changed a lot of our procedures, we have changed the services, the way we deliver, all sorts of things, because people have been so enthusiastic, you know, like what they learned and how can we do things differently. It's been brilliant.
Great, I'm glad there are some silver linings
Yeah.
after this year that we've had, absolutely.
Every cloud.
I know, and I have spoken to one or two who certainly would never have got to it otherwise, and they've gained a lot from it. And on that point, our final, most recent fellow then is Ria, who is really a very good example of, I suppose, what I'm talking about in terms of people who are looking towards growth and development in that sort of younger age bracket, shall I say, and no disrespect to the rest of us who are on this call, but the idea that many have now, that multiple careers are actually within our reach. People used to kind of go into one career and stay with it the whole of their life. And it's interesting, Mima sort of saying, oh, you know, I did this accounting degree, and, you know, it actually broadens, and Ria's got, you know, very interesting background in terms of her journey. And so Ria, in terms of your journey, give us a flavour of what it's like from your perspective.
So thanks, Carmelina. My journey with learning and development has been quite interdisciplinary, like you said. I think as all learning and development journeys should be. I did my MSc in clinical mental health from University College London. When I came back, I worked as a therapist and a psychologist at a hospital in India, where I worked with adolescents and young adults dealing with depression and anxiety. So very far from where I am today. And like you said, certain professions require you to constantly keep your, learning and development journey updated and going in order to grow professionally. So I trained in behavior therapy, and I did neurolinguistic programming while I was practicing. And that became a big part of what I practiced as a psychologist. Then came a point where I felt like I needed to change my field and I needed to grow in different areas, when I started reading about global mobility. And I actually read about like a lot of areas, and global mobility was one of them. And it is what you actually said in the beginning, Carmelina, that the psychological elements involved in helping people transition from one location to another is what got me interested in global mobility. And then I, read about Formula, who was also very focused on providing like a smooth transition to people across cultures. So that's how I got into this field. And now my learning and development journey keeps going. I did the MIM and MIM Plus program with EuRA, which was actually a major milestone in my journey, because I think you speak a lot about coaching approaches and mobility, which is when I started thinking about how can I apply skills from psychology and from NLP into global mobility, and how can I bring that learning into this field. And well, that's been my personal journey with learning and development, and it has shaped a lot of how I try and create learning development programs at Formula. So to say, like, even though, learning and development journeys sound very haphazard, but they're very purposeful, in my opinion. It's always goal directed. So when I'm transitioning out of psychology into other fields, I'm learning about different fields purposefully. When I enter the field, I'm thinking about, okay, my goal is how do I apply psychology skills from psychology to global mobility? So I'm reading and learning things that take me towards that goal. So I personally believe that learning and development journeys are purposeful and goal directed. And so I think that's what we also try at Formula, to make sure that our learning and development programs are aligned with the larger goal or larger purpose of the organization, and the programs sort of move in that direction rather than being sort of haphazard. And I think that's something that I've sort of taken from my personal journey into what I'm trying to do with Formula right now.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point about that alignment that you talk about, because I think there are two things here. The first is, yes, it's not just an investment; it is actually working towards the goals of the organisation and making those choices. And what you said about applying skills into the different field, because we're in relocation, we have this situation where there isn't a body of knowledge. We've got a body of knowledge about cross-cultural work and stuff, but it is still an emerging field, and therefore being able to bring those ideas from fraud or from, you know, different disciplines or psychology or wherever it might be, and adapting them and making them fit is really quite an important task, and it's one that I don't think people kind of appreciate as to where those multidisciplinary boundaries actually are. So thank you for that. Doma, can I hand back to you to sort of, if we've got questions or anything you want to pick up on things we've been talking about?
Well, thank you. Yes, I forgot to say at the beginning, if at any point you've got a question for any of our panelists, you can either put it into the chat box or you can put it into the Q&A, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen if you hover your mouse across the bottom there. And we will come back to doing some Q&A. I think it's been very, very interesting talking with you all about your journeys. And I would just come back to, I think, from my own personal perspective in terms of being in the role that I'm in, I remember very, very clearly when I came into EuRA, Tad saying, oh, there's a thing called the EARP, you can go off and deal with that. And that became the EuRA Academy. But I think, Mimi, you were involved in that right at the beginning. And that was the joint initiative to put together some umbrella training, which...
And that was about 2000, 2002 or something?
Exactly. And I went off and then did my master's. I pulled out of Relo and followed more of a path of RIA, really. I went and did a master's in social work. But then coming back in, having had that experience, worked in social work, and then coming back in, Carmelina, you and I then worked on the Coaching and Mobility program, the MIM program, you know, we developed, but then coaching approaches became this extraordinary, for me, journey of looking at all of these different facets, exactly as you said, Ria, and exactly as you said, Carmelina, that then feed back into our profession. All those skills that you need as practitioners in mobility that we were able to touch on in that program. So, you know, that for me, that was one of the biggest learning journeys for me, was coming back and then developing that coaching approaches in mobility with that amazing group of people. I remember sitting in London doing that you suddenly realize just how complex this industry is and how many skills you all have to bring to play, all of you listening and all of you watching. So yeah, kudos to everybody.
Well, Dom, I'll just add this point. Obviously, you know, we've seen it evolve with things like the Quality Seal and with Gordon's involvement. You know, okay, Ria and I probably come at it from a psychological perspective, but there's also the whole, you know, quality and fraud that Mim was talking about, and quality processes and all that kind of stuff. You know, we have taken from lots of different disciplines, and they are all relevant in their way. To how we run a successful business and demonstrate our expertise and our added value. It's not actually just producing widgets. We have quite a complex set of tasks that we have to cover. So have we got any questions?
Susan,
very quiet.
Great link in the Q&A to an article from MIT Sloan, Executing the CEO's Agenda Through Targeted Learning. Thank you very much for that, Susan. So I will be downloading that in a moment. Yeah, like I say, if anybody's got comments or anything, just put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat box. I will keep my eye on those, and we'll come to all of that towards the end of the session.
And also, I mean, if anybody wants to know anything about any of the MIM or the training offer, that wasn't really the focus, but because we have had so many people go through MIM and MIM Plus, also if anybody's interested in doing the fellowship, we have, you know, proof that it can be done on the screen. And this may be the time to get in quickly before the world hits us again.
I did mine. I forgot about that when I was talking about, you know, personal journeys. I did mine as a case study for the case study back in, I think, 2004 when we set up the program. And I did it on working in an intercultural board. And I say this with, I can see Alistair and Anita, both, you know, current and past board members, and Anita as past president, how EuRA's journey matured over the years with the understanding of really needing to know about how to work in an intercultural framework as a board. Because at the beginning, you could identify tensions between, you know, factions or people based purely on intercultural misunderstanding. And that's been a thread that we've really woven throughout all the programs, right into coaching approaches in mobility. In fact, I think, Carmeline, that was the driver behind CAM, was that we took intercultural theory but laid it over individual practice. And that's been fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I would just add that to do with the fellowship, I mean, all those that are most successful are people who've done case studies on things which are directly relevant to their organizations. So they are an outcome of their learning, they are not an output. So when people do, you know, think, oh, I've got to do a fellowship, I've got to do the case study, I've got to write this thing. And yes, there is a bit of sort of getting it together, but it should be really merged with what you're doing already, the thinking you're already doing about your organization or the sort of challenges you're facing, because then it just becomes a byproduct of that thinking and structuring that thinking. Whereas if you treat it completely separately as another thing to do, it is just that, it's another thing to do, it's another thing on to-do list, and it ain't ever going to happen, because, you know, we know life is busy. So if you find something that is of interest, make sure that it's purely integrated with what you do on a daily basis, so that that thinking time, that thinking investment time is valuable to you in your career or your rollout or whatever that might be. Right. So Aideen, have you got any other useful books for us? Apart, I've written down the Surrounded by Idiots. Are there any others?
I really loved that one. And I think his inspiration, you were talking earlier, something about idiots, you know, the idiot, but his inspiration was he went in to have a meeting with an MD of a company and met him. And the guy was all frustrated. He said, geez, he said, I'm just surrounded by idiots. And after a few minutes, he was kind of thinking about this. And then he kind of said back to him, well, who hired the idiots, you know? So it got him thinking, and, you know, he wrote this book. But, you know, I think we kind of started out our journey with this book called Scaling Up. So it was kind of for small business getting ready to scale up. And that was a great start for us. One of my favorites was something called Extreme Ownership. So it's based on kind of SAS guys, and, you know, the chapters, it's a really, really easy read, because it kind of sets out the training, you know, what they're looking to do, what their experience in the battlefield was, and then bringing that into the company and the corporate and everything. And I really did enjoy that. And then there's other ones like Let's Start with the Why by Simon Sinek, and How to Win Friends and Influence People as well. So they've kind of been the good ones.
Yeah, the Let's Start with Why is there's quite a good TED talk on that, isn't there, that he does, so you can read that. I also I was reminded, I've got a book and it says leadership is like herding cats, which I think is probably very similar. But one I quite like from the coaching side is something called Humble Inquiry, and if you like a coaching approach, that's a very easy read and quite short as well.
And I find useful as well for people, if you're super busy, you just may not have time to read a book, but there's this app called Blinks, and that just synopsizes the books for you, gets the salient points in, and it'll take you through the book quite quickly as well.
Yeah. So if I come to the other two, Mima, have you got anything that you've any concepts, ideas, things you've read or seen that you think, well, this was an interesting idea?
I think the last couple of months, I only been reading about forensic accounting and everything else. It's quite sort of fraud centric at the moment. But what you said about the fifth discipline, that was one of the book has really taught a lot.
Yeah.
And it's well written. I can't remember when it was published, but it's been around for so many years.
Yeah. And he's got the learning organization as well. And I mean, it's interesting because, you know, How to Win Friends and Influence People is really very, very old now. But nonetheless, you know, still does have some interesting ideas and points in it. Ria, have we got any more recent references from you that you think, ooh?
I mean, not a book though, but like, since you guys are talking and I'm listening to you all, I've been thinking about something that I'm going to research more about, but I will share it, and it's related to learning and development. there's a concept called neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
If Carmelina knows that, right? Or it's our brain's ability to adapt and modify itself in the face of new experiences and new learnings. And since, we work, and this is what I've been thinking of ever since I started reading about global mobility, is that we are a field where we are expected to interact with people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, different ways of existing, different ideas, whose perspectives lie sort of outside our perspectives. And learning and development programs are the best ways to, use this power of neuroplasticity, and sort of, it literally means that we're expanding our brain to include other perspectives. So, when organizations invest in learning and development programs, they're creating employees and sort of a workforce that's flexible and more empathetic and more open to new perspectives. So especially in global mobility, I think I've been reading a lot about neuroplasticity. So for global mobility, I think that learning and development programs can be one of the greatest investments. So I thought I'll share that and more when I research a little more. So
yeah, and it's interesting because this idea of it kind of completely debunks the I can't possibly learn anything new, I'm now the age I am sort of thing. That's gone completely out the window. But it also does play into this idea of what Ria's just said about flexible individuals. We don't want people who come to work who are just a robot. They do A plus B equals C, and that's all I do, because life isn't like that anymore. We need people who are flexible and who can adapt. And therefore, by promoting that activity of expanding their brains, as Ria's saying, we will reap the benefits of that, because it sets the expectation that is what we want from our individuals. We're not, there's this idea which I quite like, which is one of Stephen Covey's ideas, who's another kind of management theorist. And he talks about the jobs of today, and this is now quite old, but he talks about it as an inverted donut, and people kind of look at you as if you've lost your mind. But an inverted donut means that the solid bit is in the middle and the hole is on the outside. And some people kind of go, well, that surely there's nothing on the outside, and that's not quite true. The hole is on the outside. So it's fluid, it's unseen, it's not quite sure, but it's there. And that's what jobs are like. They've got a solid bit in the middle, which everybody can count and appraise against. But then there's this fluffy bit around the edge, and nobody quite knows where the edges are, and nobody knows quite what's in it, because if they knew what was in it, they would have put it in the solid bit in the first place. So it's like we want people, and people say, oh, well, what do you want me to do? Well, I don't know. It's in that fluffy bit around the outside. And I go, but if you don't tell me what to do, how do I know what to do? Well, you need to think about what needs to be in the fluffy bit. So, but anyway, I'll leave you with that as a thought. So Dominic, shall I hand back to you as we hit our sort of 45 minutes?
No, that's brilliant. I mean, I was just, Ria, that's so funny because we hadn't talked about neuroplasticity prior to the session, but it's weird how you read something for the very first time and then you hear it again and again and again, right? And that's one of the things that I've always loved about, ongoing education. But I've had a bad back. And so I've been reading this guy, Dr. Howard Schubiner, who wrote Unlearn Your Pain, which is all about, training using neuroscience. And it's so fascinating to me how neuroscience now is reaching out organizationally. And people are really starting to look at how our brains are wired, what we do, why we do what we do, how we can unlearn as well as learn, which I just thought was...
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And
in fact, neuro-linguistic programming is a lot about that. It's all about, taking the power of neuroplasticity and then sort of unlearning and learning ways to deal with your emotions and your life and work. Yes.
Very, very fascinating.
And some of the large organizations now have behavior teams, behavioral organizational teams, which is quite scary.
Well, Elisa French, who was one of the pioneers in relocation, built a big company in Germany and then totally changed careers and went into, she is now an organizational neuro pathway coach and works, until March last year, worked all over the world, bringing that message to enormous organizations. So yeah, it's fascinating. The other thing I was going to say was I have this collection of books here, which are the Xenophobes guides. These are so good. They're actually, I mean, you have to say they're quite funny. You have to take them with a pinch of salt, but they're always written by an intercultural expert from the culture that's being talked about. So there's the English, there's the Scots, there's the Germans, the Irish, the French, the Belgians, the Russians. There's loads of them. And I just always remember, I think Mimi, you and I talked about these. It's like, should they go into orientation packs? What do you need to know about coming to England, learning the English? And, you know, that was just, you know, where I was coming from. So, Susan Ginsberg, thank you so much. You put a recommendation in the Q&A. Book recommendation, Bring Yourself, How to Harness the Power of Connection to Negotiate Fearlessly by Maury Tahirpour. So thank you for that. I shall look that up. Again, if anybody else has suggestions of things that they could do, we'd love to hear them. But yeah, no, I guess my interest in this session was to hear, again, from Ria, Aideen and Mima, and obviously from Carmelina from a specific point of view, the benefit organizationally, because I think, you know, another thing we talked about in the pre-session last week was whether there is a cultural aspect to the acceptance of learning and development, whether certain cultures are more open to it. And certainly looking at the demographics of who's taken up the MIM program, it's very clear that there are specific cultures who really value the team and the educational health of the team and the educational development of the team, and others that do not. And I found that, just because I'm fascinated by culture, I found that very interesting.
Dom, is that specifically cultural, or is it partly led by the cultural person who's in charge, or the culture of the person who's in charge?
It's, to a degree, it's cultural, but also it's organizational. So, you know, when you look at, for example, all three of your companies have invested in training because you see that that's something your team wants, that promotes organizational growth, that promotes productivity. And that is led by you as individuals, right? So it doesn't necessarily reflect on the culture. But it's interesting how I was talking with Sabine Bayerlocker about this a while back, whether there is a correlation between communicative cultures and so cultures that use time in different ways, monocultural cultures versus polychronic cultures. Polychronic cultures tend to be more willing to embrace new ideas because the nature of the culture is that you move from thing to thing. I mean, Carmelina, you've given a great example of, you know, when you go back to Italy, the difference in how time is used and approached is huge. And I think that does really impact on education and training.
Well, if I may, I mean, this year we're all about people and culture and wellness in the business, you know, because of kind of the sacrifices and challenges for last year. But when we asked everybody, you know, what would they like to do? What are they most interested in? And one of the things they all came back with was to learn Arabic. So about 80% of us now are learning Arabic, and we're having the best fun learning it. We have a teacher who uses a very different style. She's teaching us through mind mapping. So we're not learning to read or write, it's just to speak it. And we have the best 90 minutes every week, and great fun and laughter in doing it, you know. But that was their suggestion collectively that they wanted to do this.
That's brilliant. I'm just going to give a bit of a shout out because when I was talking about cultural time, I remember that Anita Meyer, who's listening in the audience today, she did her fellowship case study on the importance of understanding perceptions of time in a cross-cultural relocation context, it's on the EuRA website. Go look it up. It's a really, really interesting thing that feeds into so many different things about how we relate, and, you know, Ria's case study about communication and communication styles, and, you know, Aideen exactly what you said. So yeah, it's fascinating. With the help of Carmelina, Anita says, thank you. That's very sweet of you. So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat box and put them into the Q&A. This is a topic which I think, you know, I'm very grateful to you all to bringing it to our audience, and this will be on YouTube next week. But I think if you don't have any more comments or questions, we'll draw this to a conclusion. And again, I'll just reiterate what I said at the beginning. The free access to MIM certification is now extended until the beginning of May. And let's just all hope that, as you said, you know, Aideen, you so eloquently said about, you know, the value of being in a room as a team and sharing an experience. That's something that's challenged us all this last year. Yeah, we will get back to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I just pick up on Dean's point about laughter as well, to not underestimate the power, the healing power of laughter. You know, she was talking about using a learning event as fun, and, you know, learning doesn't have to be, you know, oh, let's read this big, thick book and digest it. It should be opening the mind and creative and give people a bit of a boost from a lighter perspective.
Exactly.
That's so true. And Carmelina and Mima, you were both on that TCO international training that we did a couple of years back in London, where we all sat, and it was a whole day. We just laughed and laughed and laughed all day. There was that exercise about, we all had to be blindfolded and you had to figure out the shape of,
yeah.
Yes.
trainer. It was a really difficult exercise. And I can't even remember the ins and outs of it, but I remember the trainer saying, my goodness, this is an industry that communicates without words. So well done, mobility professionals. He was incredibly impressed. But yeah, you're right. The power of laughter and the power of sharing and the power of being together. We've lost a bit of that this year, but thanks to brilliant people like you, we will get that back.
And I think I'd like to add to, sorry, Carmelina's point, what she said in the beginning, that learning and development programs are sometimes not even about the content. It's a lot about like creating a sort of safe space for people to be like, you know, I'm learning the same thing that you're learning, even though I'm 6 years ahead in experience from you. And that just like brings this sort of leveling ground to all the employees. And that leads to, I think, very good employee engagement. So absolutely, that's a major, major plus point.
Definitely. Well, look, thank you so much, Ria. On that note, Ria, Aideen, Mima, Carmelina, thank you so much for bringing this topic to life. It's been a great conversation and a great chat. And like I say, to everybody who's listening, I will be sending you the link to this. So again, if you want to use it as a shared training experience, along with every other briefing that we've done, they're all live on the YouTube channel. Just search EuRA on YouTube and you will find all of these resources. There are some amazing things there, from memes about fraud to everything that's ever been discussed about GDPR is on there. Everything that's ever needed to know about Brexit, everything you need to know. So go have a look. And like I say, if you haven't signed up to the Academy, it's all free again until the beginning of May. There's a great deal of content on there. And there's more coming up. Susan Ginsberg, thank you very much, Susan, is developing Collaborating in the Next Normal, which will be going live in May. And we will be, every time we launch a new MIM Plus module, it will be free for everyone to certify for the first month. That's the new idea. Anyway, listen, thank you all of you for paying attention and for being with us today, but especially Carmelina, Ria, Aideen and Mima. Thank you so much for being part of this. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see each other soon in person.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.